My best friend used my husband for a public prank. Here's what happened. There are moments in life that shake you to your core. Events are so unexpected that reality bends for a brief second, and nothing makes sense. That was me, sitting at my best friend's baby shower, watching her stand in front of a crowd of smiling guests. Then, without warning, she pointed to my wonderful, devoted husband and announced that he was the father of her child. The room went silent. At that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Sarah and I had been best friends for years. We met in college and bonded over late-night study sessions, our love for the same music, and our shared dreams of making something of ourselves. Even after graduation, when our lives took different paths, we stayed close. I built my career in law. She pursued social media as a job. It didn't matter. Every weekend, we set aside time for each other. Dinners, hikes, movies, whatever we could fit into our schedules. Sarah was like family. So when she told me she was pregnant, I was genuinely happy for her. She asked me to plan her baby shower, and I said yes without hesitation. I didn't realize I was walking into a disaster. The shower was supposed to be perfect. Sarah loved the color yellow, so that became the theme. I made sure the cake was flawless, that the decorations were exactly how she wanted them. My husband, Michael, helped me set up, making sure everything looked just right. Sarah's husband, Mark, greeted guests at the door. For the first hour, everything felt normal. Guests arrived, conversations flowed, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe this would be a beautiful day. Then Sarah stood up. She thanked everyone for coming. She smiled, glowing under the soft lights. And then, without a hint of hesitation, she pointed at my husband. Everyone, I'd like to introduce the father of my baby. Silence. Complete, deafening silence. My heart pounded as my brain scrambled to make sense of what I had just heard. Michael's grip tightened on my hand. He wasn't a man who enjoyed attention, and now every pair of eyes in the room was locked on him. On us. I turned to him, searching for an answer. His face was a mirror of my own, pure confusion. This had to be some kind of mistake, a misunderstanding. I looked at Sarah, waiting for her to explain. And then, just as quickly as she had spoken, she burst out laughing. I was just kidding, guys. This is all for my Instagram. She waved toward the corners of the room, where cameras had been discreetly placed. She was filming, turning this moment, this insane, humiliating moment, into content. And she was laughing, like this was funny, like she hadn't just turned my entire world upside down. I should have gotten up right then and walked out, but I didn't. I sat there, frozen, trying to process what had just happened. The discomfort in the room was palpable. Some guests let out awkward laughs. Others shifted in their seats, clearly just as unsettled as I was. Mark, Sarah's husband, looked at her in shock. My husband, who had done nothing but support me, was sitting beside me, his face red with embarrassment. Sarah, oblivious to the tension, continued chatting, taking pictures, acting like nothing had happened. Likewise, this was just another fun little joke. Michael leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't do this. I grabbed his hand under the table. Just a little longer, I whispered back. I knew he wanted to leave. I wanted to leave too. But if we walked out now, it would create a scene. So we stayed. For now. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Sitting there, surrounded by people trying to laugh off an unforgivable joke, I realized something. Sarah wasn't the person I thought she was. The woman I had called my best friend, the one I had trusted for years, had just humiliated me and my husband in front of a room full of people, for content. She didn't care about the damage. She didn't care about the way Michael's face had gone pale, how Mark had stiffened in shock. She only cared about the reaction, the clicks, the attention. And I wasn't going to forget it. The rest of the shower was a blur. People went back to their conversations, trying to move past what had just happened. But I saw the side glances, the hushed whispers. Michael barely spoke. His hand was still in mine, but his grip had loosened. Mark, Sarah's husband, looked miserable. He kept rubbing his temples as if trying to process what his wife had just done. Sarah, on the other hand, was glowing. She basked in the attention, the cameras, the laughter that felt more forced than real. And I sat there, watching it all unfold, forcing myself to breathe. The moment the cake was cut, Michael leaned in. Can we go now? I nodded. I didn't want to stay a second longer. But before we could slip away, Sarah appeared beside me, her smile wide, her eyes bright with excitement. Wasn't that hilarious? She asked, completely oblivious. I stared at her, trying to find the right words. What was that, Sarah? Oh, come on. You know it's just for fun. My followers are gonna eat this up. Followers. That's all that mattered to her. Those are not my feelings. Not Michael's. Not her own husband's. Just engagement numbers. I felt Michael's hand on my back, a silent reminder to stay calm. I swallowed down the anger and forced out a polite response. Glad you're enjoying yourself. She beamed. I knew you get it. That's why I love you. Her words rang hollow. This wasn't love. This wasn't friendship. This was exploitation. And I wasn't going to let it slide. As we left, I turned back to see Mark still sitting there, staring at his drink. He looked tired. Defeated. And for the first time, I wondered if he knew. If he understood what kind of person his wife had become. Or if he had spent just as much time ignoring the signs as I had. Michael didn't speak until we were in the car. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. What the hell was that? I don't know. But I did. I knew exactly what it was. A test. A boundary pushed just to see if I would break. And Sarah had been doing it for years. This wasn't the first time she had made inappropriate jokes at my expense. She had always loved putting people on the spot, seeing how far she could go before they snapped. But I had let it slide. Because I thought that was just her personality. She didn't mean harm. I had spent years convincing myself that she would never actually cross a line she couldn't come back from. Until today. Michael reached for my hand. You know this isn't okay, right? I nodded. So what are you going to do? I didn't answer right away. Because for the first time in my life I wasn't sure what to do about Sarah. But one thing was clear, this wasn't something I could ignore. Not anymore. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Michael's hands remained tight on the wheel, his knuckles pale from gripping too hard. He hadn't said much since we left, but I knew him well enough to recognize when he was holding back. I wasn't sure if he was waiting for me to say something first or if he was afraid of how I might react. But the truth was I didn't know how to react. Sarah had turned one of the most humiliating moments of my life into a joke for strangers. And she had done it so effortlessly. Not a second thought, not a moment of hesitation. She decided in that room, in front of all those people, to gamble with our friendship for the sake of a few clicks. And she had won at least in her mind. Because to her, none of this was real. Not my embarrassment. Not Michael's discomfort. Not Mark's quiet horror as he watched his wife turn the party into a spectacle. Just another story for the internet. Another video to boost engagement. And the worst part? She was proud of it. The next morning, I woke up to a notification overload. Sarah had uploaded the clip. Not just to one platform but everywhere. A curated, perfectly trimmed version of the event. Gone were the moments of uncomfortable silence, the way Michael tensed beside me, the way guests looked around in shock. Instead, it was edited for entertainment. A 5-second punchline, followed by forced laughter. A viral joke at my expense. Her caption read, "Should I do more pranks like this?" I stared at my phone, my stomach twisting. She wasn't reflecting on what she had done. She wasn't considering how it had made me feel. She was treating it like content. And the comments were flooding in. Hundreds of strangers laughing at something they knew nothing about. Egging her on. Encouraging her to push the boundaries even further next time. I felt sick. Michael walked into the room, coffee in hand, and stopped when he saw my face. She posted it, didn't she? I nodded, turning the screen so he could see for himself. He barely glanced at it before setting his coffee down with a sharp exhale. I reported it. His voice was calm, but I could tell he was holding back. She's never going to take it down, I muttered. Then she's not the person you thought she was. It hit harder than I expected. Because deep down I already knew it was true. I typed out a message, my fingers shaking from something between anger and exhaustion. Take the video down. Sarah replied immediately. Relax. It's just a joke. My jaw was clenched. It wasn't funny. The typing bubble appeared. Paused. Disappeared. Then finally, it's my content. I'm keeping it up. She had made her choice. Now I was making mine. I went through my contacts, found her name, and removed it. Social media blocked. Messages deleted. The weight I had carried for years, the constant excuses, the justifications I made for her behavior, it all disappeared with a few taps on a screen. She had been in my life for so long that I had convinced myself she was permanent. But people aren't permanent. Especially not the ones who treat you like a joke. That evening, my phone rang again. Mark. I hesitated before answering, already knowing why he was calling. His voice was quieter than usual, filled with something close to regret. I tried to talk to her, he admitted. She won't listen. I let out a slow breath. I know. Mark wasn't responsible for Sarah's choices. He had been just as blindsided as I was. But at the same time I wondered how much he had overlooked. How many times had he watched her push people too far, brushing it off as part of her personality? How long had he been making excuses for her, the same way I had? He sighed. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. It wasn't his apology to give, but I appreciated it anyway. After I had hung up, I felt something shift inside me. Sarah had always been the kind of person who needed an audience, who thrived off of attention no matter the cost. She had spent years pushing limits, seeing how far she could go before someone finally told her no. This time I told her no. And I wasn't going to change my mind. Cutting Sarah out of my life should have felt like a loss. But as the days passed, I realized something. I wasn't mourning our friendship. I was mourning the illusion of it. The version of Sarah I had held onto for years, the one I believed cared about me, respected me, valued our bond, that person had never really existed. She had always been like this. The only difference was that this time I finally saw it for what it was. And once I did, there was no going back. Her video stayed up. Of course it did. Every time I checked, the views had skyrocketed. She was gaining followers, thriving off the attention. And in her mind that meant she had won. But there was one thing she hadn't considered. She wasn't the only one controlling the narrative. People started commenting things she didn't expect. They noticed Michael's discomfort. They caught the way Mark's face darkened when she spoke. They questioned why no one was laughing in the background. Someone even said, "This doesn't feel like a joke. You made them uncomfortable." More and more comments followed. People were reading between the lines. And for someone like Sarah, someone who lived for approval, it was the one thing she hadn't prepared for. 2 days later, she sent me a message. Not an apology. Not an admission of guilt. Just a half-hearted attempt at damage control. "People are being dramatic about the video. You should help clear things up." I didn't respond. Because her problem wasn't my problem. Not anymore. Mark called again that night. "She's losing it," he muttered. His voice was quiet, strained. "She thought people would love it, but now she's freaking out because some of them aren't on her side." I leaned back against the couch, letting his words settle. Sarah had spent her entire life believing she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. For once, she was realizing that wasn't true. "I don't know what you want me to say, Mark," I replied. I think she knows she messed up." I let out a slow breath. "That's her problem to fix. Not mine." And for the first time, I meant it. A week passed. Then another. Sarah stopped posting. The comments under the video turned against her. The laughter died out, replaced by people calling her out, telling her she had gone too far. She had built a platform on pushing limits. Now she was facing the reality of what happened when you push too far. And I wasn't about to step in and save her. One evening I checked her page again. The video was gone. Not because she had suddenly developed a conscience. Not because she had realized how much she had hurt me. But because she had lost control of the story. For someone like Sarah, that was the worst possible outcome. Michael wrapped an arm around my shoulders as I set my phone down. "Feeling better?" I thought about it for a moment. I hadn't won anything. There was no grand moment of victory, no satisfying confrontation. But for the first time, I felt free. "Yeah," I murmured. "I am." Sarah disappeared from social media for a while. No new posts, no updates, no desperate attempts to justify herself. It was the longest she had ever gone without posting, and honestly, it felt strange. Like the silence after a storm. But I knew her too well to believe it would last. Michael and I moved on. We stopped talking about her, stopped checking for updates. There was nothing left to say. She had made her choices, and so had I. For the first time in years, my life wasn't weighed down by her constant need for attention. And I refused to let her take up space in my mind any longer. Then, out of nowhere, Mark called again. "She wants to talk." I sat up straighter, gripping my phone tighter. "Why?" "She says she wants to apologize." The words felt foreign. Unnatural coming from someone like Sarah. The same person who had laughed at my discomfort, who had refused to take the video down, who had only cared about the backlash when it started affecting her. Now she suddenly felt bad? I wasn't buying it. "I don't think I want to hear it," I admitted. Mark sighed, like he had been expecting that answer. "She's been miserable," he said. "She's losing followers. Brands are pulling deals. She's freaking out." I almost laughed. So that was it. Not guilt. Not regret. Just consequences. And she couldn't handle them. "Look," Mark continued, "I know she messed up. I know she hurt you. But this is the first time I've ever seen her scared. Maybe she's finally realizing she can't treat people like this. Maybe. But that wasn't my problem. For years, I had given Sarah endless chances. I had excused her behavior, forgiven her when she pushed too far. But this wasn't something I could just forget. She had humiliated me. She had made my husband uncomfortable. She had laughed at our expense, refusing to acknowledge how badly she had hurt me until her world started falling apart. And now she expected me to be part of her redemption arc. I wasn't interested. "I hope she figures things out, Mark." But I'm done. He didn't argue. Maybe he understood. Maybe he had finally reached his limit. I get it, he murmured. I don't know what's going to happen to her. That wasn't my responsibility. Not anymore. That night, Michael and I sat on the balcony, a quiet breeze carrying the sounds of the city below. Do you regret anything? He asked. I thought about it. Everything I had ignored, every moment I had let slide, every red flag I had pushed aside for the sake of keeping the peace. No, I finally said. I just regret not walking away sooner. And that was something I would never let happen again. Sarah never reached out to me directly. Whatever apologies she had planned, whatever words she wanted to say, it never happened. Maybe she realized I wouldn't entertain it. Maybe she knew that nothing she could say would fix what she had done. Either way, the silence didn't bother me. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for her next move. Because she wasn't part of my life anymore. Mark and I didn't speak again after that last call. He had been the only connection between me and Sarah, and now that was gone too. I wondered if he had finally started seeing her for who she was. If he had spent those weeks questioning how many times he had ignored the red flags. If he was realizing the way I had that Sarah was never going to change. Or if, like always, he was just waiting for things to blow over. One evening I scrolled past a familiar name on social media. Sarah had returned. Her page was still there, but it wasn't the same. The once overflowing comment section had dwindled. The engagement that had fueled her every move had slowed. The video that started it all was gone, erased like it had never happened. But the damage was already done. She had spent so long building her brand on pushing boundaries. Now, she had learned what happened when she crossed the wrong line. And people hadn't forgotten. I didn't click on her profile. Didn't feel the urge to check what she was posting, what new persona she was trying to craft. She was a stranger now. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a relief. Michael noticed my expression and tilted his head. Everything okay? I glanced at my phone once more before setting it down. Yeah. And I meant it. I had spent so much time worrying about Sarah, making space for her in my life, forgiving things I never should have. But now? She wasn't my problem. She never would be again. And that was more freeing than anything I could have imagined. Life moved on, and so did I. There were no more late-night texts from Sarah, no invitations to grab coffee, and no attempts to mend what she had broken. For years, she had been a constant in my life, someone I thought I could rely on. But now? She was just a memory. And I was okay with that. Michael and I focused on our future. Without the weight of Sarah's drama, everything felt lighter. We spent our weekends exploring new places, trying restaurants we had always talked about but never got around to visiting. For the first time, my life didn't feel like it was on standby, waiting for the next crisis to unfold. Because that cycle had finally ended. One afternoon, I ran into an old friend from college. We caught up over coffee, reminiscing the things we had outgrown and the people we had left behind. Sarah's name came up briefly. I saw the video she posted, they said, stirring their drink absent-mindedly. That was messed up. I shrugged. Yeah, it was. They hesitated like they wanted to say something else. You don't miss her? The question caught me off guard. Not because I hadn't thought about it, but because I already knew the answer. No. And for the first time, there was no hesitation. No guilt. Just peace. Sarah had always been the kind of person who believed she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. She thought friendships were unbreakable, that people would always forgive her no matter how many times she crossed the line. But this time she had gone too far. And when she finally faced the fallout, she realized something too late. I wasn't one of her followers. I wasn't there for entertainment. I had been her friend. And she had lost me. That night, Michael and I sat on our balcony watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Do you ever wonder what she's doing now? He asked. I thought about it for a moment. Not really. Sarah would always find a way to keep going. That was who she was. But I didn't have to be part of her world anymore. And for me, that was enough. Hope you enjoyed this story as much as I do. Help this small channel grow by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. Every bit of support means the world. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.